Hi, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 17. So, in Chapter 16, Bastion left the Temple of 1,000 Doors because he decided he wanted to go looking for our boy, Atreyu. On the way, he found four knights that were having a picnic and a princess, so five people. And the first knight was Hero Hynreck, who is braver and stronger and handsomer than all the knights in all Fantasia, and he just has to tell everybody he meets how amazing he is. He has to prove it. Part of that is because of the princess, who he's just head over heels in love with, Princess Oglamar. He has to prove himself to be the best, otherwise she won't give him the time of day. The other three knights were Hicreon, the strong, Hisbald, the swift, and Hydorn, the enduring. They told Bastion that Atreyu is in the Silver City of Amarganth putting together a tournament because he wants to go and find the savior of Fantasia, who gave the childlike empress her new name, Moonchild, and saved all of Fantasia from destruction. And the tournament, the last three contestants left standing are going to go with Atreyu on an expedition to find the savior and protect him. And Bastion, who didn't tell them who he was keeping it a big old secret. He can't contain himself when they're telling the story because he's thinking, oh, they're talking about me. This is really exciting. So they get to the city, which is a really cool city made completely out of silver on this lake of basically acid. It'll dissolve everything that gets into it. And the Silver City is on boats that kind of float around and can be rearranged however the people want. So they have the tournament. The last three standing are Hydorn, Hicreon, and Hisbald, and then Hero Hynreck strides into the middle of all of this and schools all three of them because he's just that amazing. And then Bastion shows up, and with all his magic powers and his super strength and super speed and his magic sword Seconda, he makes a complete idiot out of poor Hero Hynreck in front of everybody. And then after he wins the tournament, Atreyu recognizes him and says, well, we don't need an expedition because the Savior Fantasia is right here, and he doesn't need us to protect him because he's actually pretty awesome. So now him and Atreyu are besties, and Hero Hynreck has kind of disappeared for a little bit while the whole city just celebrates the Savior Fantasia's here, and they're just so darn happy. So if you felt bad for Hero Hynreck in the last chapter being made into a total fool in front of the entire city and his girlfriend, you might enjoy this next chapter, chapter 17, A Dragon for Hero Hynreck. And there's our screenshot for the chapter. Okay, let's go. Quercabad, the Silver Sage, had slumped down in his chair asleep, for already the hour was late. Consequently, he missed an experience more beautiful and more extraordinary than any he had known in the 107 years of his life. And so did many others in Amarganth, citizens as well as visitors who, exhausted by the festivities, had gone to bed. Only a few were still awake, and those few were uniquely privileged. Falkor, the white luck dragon, was singing. High in the night sky, he flew in circles over the Lake of Tears and let his bell-like voice ring out in a song without words, a simple, grandiose song of pure joy. The hearts of all those who heard it opened wide, and so it was with Bastion and Atreyu, who were sitting side by side on the broad balcony of Quercabad's palace. Neither had ever heard the song of a luck dragon before. Hand in hand, they listened in silent delight. Each knew that the other shared his feeling, a feeling of joy at having found a friend, and they took care not to spoil it with idle words. The great hour passed, Falkor's song grew faint and gradually died away. When all was still, Quercabad woke up and excused himself. I'm afraid, he said, that old men like me need their sleep. I'm sure you youngsters will forgive me. I must really be off to bed. They wished him a good night, and Quercabad left them. Again, the two friends sat for a long while in silence, looking up at the night sky where the luck dragon was still flying in great, slow circles. From time to time, he passed across the full moon like a drifting cloud. Doesn't Falcor ever sleep? Bastion asked finally. He's asleep now, Atreyu replied. In the air? Oh, yes. He doesn't like to stay in houses, even when they're as big as Quercabad's palace. He feels cramped. He's just too big, and he's afraid of knocking things over. So he usually sleeps way up in the air. Do you think he'd let me ride him sometime? Of course he would, said Atreyu. Though it's not so easy. You've got to get used to it. I've already ridden Graugramon, said Bastion. Atreyu nodded and looked at him with admiration. So you said during your contest with Hero Hynreck. How did you tame the many-colored death? I have Arin, said Bastion. Oh, said Atreyu. He seemed surprised, but he said nothing more. Bastion took the childlike Empress's emblem from under his shirt and showed it to Atreyu. Atreyu looked at it for a while, then he muttered, So now you are wearing the gem. Thinking he detected a note of displeasure, Bastion hastened to ask, Would you like to have it back? He started undoing the chain. No! Atreyu's voice sounded almost harsh, and Bastion wondered what was wrong. Atreyu smiled apologetically and repeated gently, No, Bastion, I haven't worn it in a long while. As you like, said Bastion. Then he turned the amulet over. Look, he said, have you seen the inscription? Yes, said Atreyu, I've seen it, but I don't know what it says. How come? Greenskins can read tracks in the forest, but not letters. This time it was Bastion who said, Oh. What does it say? Atreyu asked. Do what you wish, Bastion read. Atreyu stared at the amulet. So that's what it says. His face revealed nothing, and Bastion couldn't guess what he was thinking. If you had known, he asked, would it have changed anything for you? No, said Atreyu. I did what I wanted to do. That's true, said Bastion, and nodded. Again, they were both silent for a time. There's something I have to ask you, said Bastion finally. You said I looked different from when you saw me in the Magic Mirror Gate. Yes, entirely different. In what way? You were fat and pale, and you were wearing different clothes. Bastion smiled. Fat and pale? He asked incredulously. Are you sure it was me? Wasn't it? Bastion thought it over. You saw me, I know that, but I've always been the way I am now. Really and truly? I should know, shouldn't I? Bastion cried. Yes, said Atreyu looking at him thoughtfully. You should know. Maybe it was a deforming mirror. Atreyu shook his head. I don't think so. Then how do you explain seeing me that way? I don't know, Atreyu admitted. I only know that I wasn't mistaken. After that, they went silent for a long while, and at length they went to sleep. As Bastion lay in his bed, the head and foot of which were made of the finest silver filigree, his conversation with Atreyu ran through his head. Somehow it seemed to him that Atreyu was less impressed by his victory over Hero Hynreck, and even by his stay with Graugramon, since he heard that he, Bastion, was wearing the gem. And true enough, he thought, maybe his feats didn't amount to much, considering that he had the amulet to protect him. But he wanted to win Atreyu's wholehearted admiration. He thought and thought. There had to be something that no one in Fantasia could do, even with the amulet. Something of which only he, Bastion, was capable. At last it came to him. Making up stories! Time and time again he had heard it said that no one in Fantasia could create anything new. Even the voice of Yelena had said something of the kind. And just that was his special gift. He would show Atreyu that he, Bastion, was a great storyteller. He resolved to prove himself to his friend at the first opportunity, maybe the very next day. For instance, there might be a storytelling contest, and he would put all others in the shade with his inventions. Or better still, suppose all the stories he told should come true. Hadn't Graugramon said that Fantasia was the land of stories, and that even something long past could be born again if it occurred in a story? Atreyu would be amazed! And while picturing Atreyu's amazement, Bastion fell asleep. The next morning, as they were enjoying a copious breakfast in the banquet hall of the palace, Silver Sage Quercabad said, We have decided to hold a very special sort of festival for the benefit of our guest, the savior of Fantasia. and his friend who brought him to us. Perhaps, Bastian Balthazar Bux, it is unknown to you that in keeping with an age-old tradition, we Amarganthians have always been the ballad singers and storytellers of Fantasia. From an early age, our children are instructed in these skills. When they grow to adulthood, they journey from country to country for several years, practicing their art for the benefit of all. Everywhere they are welcomed with joy and respect. But we have one regret. Quite frankly, our stock of stories is small. And many of us share this little. But word has gone round, whether true or not, I don't know, that you, in your world, are famous for your stories. Is that the truth? Yes, said Bastian. They even made fun of me for it. Silver Sage Quercabod raised his eyebrows in disbelief. Made fun of you for telling stories that no one had ever heard? How is that possible? None of us can make up stories, and we, my fellow citizens and I, would all be infinitely grateful if you would give us a few. Will you help us with your genius? With pleasure, said Bastian. After breakfast, Bastian, Atreyu, and the Silver Sage went out to the steps of Quercabod's palace, where Falcor was already waiting for them. A large crowd had gathered, but on this occasion it included few of the outsiders who had come for the tournament and consisted largely of Amarganthians, men, women, and children, all comely and blue-eyed and clad in silver. Most were carrying stringed instruments, harps, lyres, guitars, or lutes, all of silver. For almost everyone there hoped to display his art in the presence of Bastian and Atreyu. Again, chairs had been put in place. Bastian sat in the middle between Quercabod and Atreyu, and Falcor stood behind them. Quercabod clapped his hands. When the crowd fell silent, he announced, "The great storyteller is going to grant our wish and make us a present of some new stories. Therefore, friends, give us your best to put him in the right mood." The Amarganthians all bowed. Then the first stepped forward and began to recite. After him came another, and still others. All had fine, resonant voices and told their stories well. Some of their tales were exciting, others merry or sad, but it would take us too long to tell them here. In all, there were no more than 100 different stories. Then they began to repeat themselves. Those who came last could only tell what their predecessors had told before them. Bastian grew more and more agitated while he waited for his turn. His last night's wish had been fulfilled to the letter, and he could hardly bear the excitement of waiting to see whether everything else would come true as well. He kept casting glances at Atreyu, but Atreyu's face was impassive, showing no sign of what he might be thinking. At length, Quercabod bade his compatriots desist, and turned to Bastian with a sigh. "I told you, Bastian Balthazar Bux, that our stock of tales was small. It's not our fault. Won't you give us a few of yours?" "I will give you all the stories I've ever told," said Bastian, "for I can always think up new ones. I told many of them to a little girl named Christa, but most I thought up only for myself. No one else has heard them. But it would take weeks and months to tell them all, and we can't stay with you that long. So I've decided to tell you a story that contains all the others in it. It's called The Story of the Library of Amarganth, and it's very short." Then, after a moment's thought, he plunged in. "In the gray dawn of time, the city of Amarganth was ruled by a silver sages named Quana. In those long past days, Moru, the Lake of Tears, hadn't been made yet, nor was Amarganth built of the special silver that withstands the water of Moru. It was still like other cities, with houses of stone and wood, and it lay in a valley among wooded hills. Quana had a son named Quinn, who was a great hunter. One day in the forest, Quinn caught sight of a unicorn, which had a glittering stone at the end of its horn. He killed the beast and took the stone home with him. His crime, for it is a crime to kill unicorns, brought misfortune on the city. From then on, fewer and fewer children were born to the inhabitants. If no remedy were found, the city would die out. But the unicorn couldn't be brought back to life, and no one knew what to do. Quana, the Silver Sages, sent a messenger to consult Yalela in the Southern Oracle. But the Southern Oracle was far away. The messenger was young when he started out, but old by the time he got back. Quana had long been dead, and her son Quinn had taken her place. He too, of course, was very old, as were all the other inhabitants. There were only 2 children left, a boy and a girl. His name was Aquil, hers was Mukwa. The messenger reported that Yalela's voice had revealed. The only way of preserving Amarganth was to make it the most beautiful city in all Fantasia. That alone would make amends for Quinn's crime. But to do so, the Amarganthians would need the help of the Acaris, who are the ugliest beings in Fantasia. Because they are so ugly, they weep uninterruptedly, and for that reason they are also known as the Weepers. Their stream of tears wash the special silver deep down in the earth, and from it they make the most wonderful filigree. All the Amarganthians went looking for the Acaris, but were unable to find them, for they lived deep down in the earth. At length, only Aquil and Mukwa were left. They had grown up, and all the others had died. Together, they managed to find the Acaris and persuade them to make Amarganth the most beautiful city in Fantasia. First, the Acaris built a small filigree palace, set it on a silver barge, and moved it to the marketplace of the dead city. Then they made their streams of underground tears well up in the valley among the wooded hills. The bitter water filled the valley and became Moru, the Lake of Tears. On it the first silver palace floated, and in the palace dwelt Aquil and Mukwa. But the Acaris had granted the plea of Aquil and Mukwa on one condition, namely that they and all their descendants should devote their lives to ballad singing and storytelling. As long as they did so, the Acaris would help them, because then their ugliness would help to create beauty. So Aquil and Mukwa founded a library, the famous Library of Amarganth, in which they stored up all my stories. They began with the one you have just heard, but little by little they added all those I have ever told. And in the end, there were so many stories that their numerous descendants who now inhabit the Silver City will never come to the end of them. If Amarganth, the most beautiful city in Fantasia, is still in existence today, it is because the Acaris and the Amarganthians kept their promise to each other. Though today the Amarganthians have quite forgotten the Acaris, and the Acaris have quite forgotten the Amarganthians. Only the name of Moru, the Lake of Tears, recalls that episode from the gray dawn of history. When Bastian had finished, the Silver Sage Quercabad rose slowly from his chair. "Bastian Balthazar Bucks," he said, smiling blissfully, "you have given us more than a story, and more than all the stories in the world, for you have given us our own history. Now we know where Moru and the silver ships and palaces on it came from. Now we know why we have always, from the earliest times, been a people of ballad singers and storytellers. And best of all, we know what is in that great round building in the middle of the city, which none of us since the founding of Amarganth has ever entered, because it has always been locked. It contains our greatest treasure, and we never knew it. It contains the Library of Amarganth." Bastian himself could hardly believe it. Everything in his story had become reality. Or had it always been? Grogramon would probably have said both. In any event, he was eager to see all with his own eyes. "Where is this building?" he asked. "I will show you," said Quercabad, and turning to the crowd, he cried, "Come along, all of you! Perhaps we shall be favored with more wonders!" A long procession, headed by the Silver Sage, Bastian, and Atreyu, moved over the gangplanks, connecting the silver ships with one another, and finally stopped outside a large building, which rested on a circular ship and was shaped like a huge silver box. The outside walls were smooth, without ornaments or windows. It had only one large door, and that door was locked. In the center of the smooth silver door, there was a stone set in a kind of ring. It looked like a piece of common glass. Over it, the following inscription could be read. "Removed from the unicorn's horn, I lost my light. I shall keep the door locked until my light is rekindled by him who calls me by name. For him I will shine 100 years. I will guide him in the dark depths of Yorsman Roud. But if he says my name a second time, from the end to the beginning, I will glow in one moment with the light of 100 years. None of us can interpret this inscription, said Quercabad. None of us knows what the words yours min raud mean. None of us to this day has ever discovered the stone's name, though we have all tried time and again. For we can only use names that already exist in Fantasia, and since these are all names of other things, none of us has made the stone glow or opened the door. Can you find the name Bastian Balthazar Bux? A deep, expectant silence fell on the Amarganthians and non-Amarganthians alike. Al-Sahir, cried Bastian. In that moment, the stone glowed bright and jumped straight from its setting into Bastian's hand. The door opened. A gasp of amazement arose from 1,000 throats. Holding the glowing stone in his hand, Bastian entered the building, followed by Quercabad and Atreyu. The crowd surged in behind them. It was dark in the large circular room, and Bastian held the stone high. Though brighter than a candle, it was not enough to light the whole room, but showed only that the walls were lined with tier upon tier of books. Attendants appeared with lamps. In the bright light, it could be seen that the walls of books were divided into sections, bearing signs such as funny stories, serious stories, exciting stories, and so on. In the center of the circular room, the floor was inlaid with an inscription so large that no one could fail to see it. Library of the Collected Works of Bastian Balthazar Bux. Atreyu looked around in amazement. Bastian saw to his delight that his friend was overcome with admiration. Is it true, asked Atreyu, pointing at the silver shelves all around, that you made up all those stories? Yes, said Bastian, slipping Al-Sahir into his pocket. Atreyu could only stand and gape. I just can't understand it, he said. The Amarganthians had flung themselves on the books and were leafing through them or reading to one another. Some sat down on the floor and began to learn passages by heart. News of the great event spread through the whole city like wildfire. As Bastian and Atreyu were leaving the library, they ran into Hicreon, Hisbald, and Hydorn. Sir Bastian, said the red-haired Hisbald, evidently the deftest of the three, not only with the sword, but with his tongue as well. We have heard about your incomparable gifts, and humbly pray you, take us into your service, and let us accompany you on your further travels. Each one of us longs to acquire a story of his own, and though you surely have no need of our protection, you may derive some advantage from the service of 3 such able and willing knights. Will you have us? Gladly, said Bastian. Anyone would be proud of such companions. The 3 knights wished to swear fealty by Bastian's sword, but he held them back. Secanda, he explained, is a magic sword. No one can touch it without mortal peril unless he has eaten, drunk, and bathed in the fire of the many-colored death. So they had to content themselves with a friendly handshake. What has become of Hero Hynreck? Bastian asked. He's a broken man, said Hicreon. Because of his lady, Hydorn added. Perhaps you can do something to help him, said Hisbald. All 5 of them went to the inn where they had stopped on their arrival in Amarganth, and where Bastian had brought Yika to the stable. When they entered, one man was sitting there, bent over the table, his hands buried in his fair hair. This man was Hynreck. Evidently, he had had a change of armor in his luggage, for the outfit he was now wearing was rather simpler than the one that had been cut to pieces the day before. In response to Bastian's greeting, he merely stared. His eyes were rimmed with red. When Bastian asked leave to sit down with him, he shrugged his shoulders, nodded, and sank back in his chair. Before him on the table was a sheet of paper, which looked as if it had been many times crumpled and smoothed out again. Can you forgive me? Said Bastian. Hero Hynreck shook his head. It's all over for me, he said mournfully. Here, read it. He pushed the note across the table, and Bastian read it. I want only the best. You have failed me. Farewell. From Princess Oglamar? Bastian asked. Hero Hynreck nodded. Immediately after our contest, she mounted her palfrey and rode off to the ferry. Heaven knows where she is now. I'll never see her again. Can't we overtake her? What for? Maybe she'll change her mind. Hero Hynreck gave a bitter laugh. You don't know Princess Oglamar, he said. I trained more than 10 years to acquire my different skills. With iron discipline, I avoided everything that could have impaired my physique. I fenced with the greatest fencing masters and wrestled with the greatest wrestlers until I could beat them all. I can run faster than a horse, jump higher than a deer. I am best at everything. Or rather, I was, until yesterday. At the start, she wouldn't honor me with a glance, but little by little my accomplishments aroused her interest. I had every reason to hope. Now I see it was all in vain. How can I live without hope? Maybe, Bastian suggested, you should forget Princess Oglamar. There must be others you could love just as much. No, said Hero Hynreck. I love Princess Oglamar just because she won't be satisfied with any but the greatest. I see, said Bastian. That makes it difficult. What could you do? Maybe you could take up a different trade. How about singing or poetry? Heinrich seemed rather annoyed. No, he said flatly. I'm a hero, and that's that. I can't change my profession, and I don't want to. I am what I am. I see, said Bastian. All were silent for a time. The three knights cast sympathetic glances at Hero Heinrich. They understood his plight. Finally, Hisbald cleared his throat and turned to Bastian. Sir Bastian, he said, I think you could help him. Bastian looked at Atreyu, but Atreyu had put on his impenetrable face. A hero like Heinrich, said Heidorn, is really to be pitied in a world without monsters. See what I mean? No, Bastian didn't see. Not yet, at any rate. Monsters, said Hicorian, winking at Bastian and stroking his huge mustache. Monsters are indispensable if a hero is to be a hero. At last, Bastian understood. Listen to me, Hero Heinrich, he said. When I suggested giving your heart to another lady, I was only putting your love to the test. The truth is that Princess Oglamar needs your help right now, and that no one else can save her. Hero Heinrich pricked up his ears. Is that true, Sebastian? It's true, as you will soon see. Only a few minutes ago, Princess Oglamar was seized and kidnapped. By whom? By one of the most terrible monsters that have ever existed in Fantasia, the dragon Smurg. She was riding across a clearing in the woods when the monster saw her from the air, swooped down, lifted her off her palfrey's back, and carried her away. Heinrich jumped up. His eyes flashed. His cheeks were aglow. He clapped his hands for joy, but then the light went out of his eyes, and he sat down. That's not possible, he said. There are no more dragons anywhere. You forgot, Hero Heinrich, that I come from far away, from much farther than you have ever been. That's true, said Atreyu, joining in for the first time. And this monster really carried her away, Hero Heinrich cried. Then he pressed both hands to his heart and sighed. Oh, my adored Oglamar, how you must be suffering! But never fear, your knight is coming! He is on his way! Tell me, what must I do? Where must I go? Far, far from here, Bastian began, there's a country called Morgul, or the land of the cold fire, because flames there are colder than ice. How you are to reach that country, I can't tell you. You must find out for yourself. In the center of Morgul, there is a petrified forest called Wadgabe, and in the center of that petrified forest stands the leaden castle of Rhaegar. It is surrounded by 3 moats. The first is full of arsenic, the second of steaming nitric acid, and the third is swarming with scorpions as big as your feet. There are no bridges across them, for the lord of the leaden castle is Smurg, the winged monster. His wings are made of slimy skin, and their spread is 100 feet. When he isn't flying, he stands on his hind legs like a gigantic kangaroo. He has the body of a mangy rat and the tail of a scorpion with a sting at the end of it. The merest touch of that sting is fatal. He has the hind legs of a giant grasshopper. His forelegs, however, which look like small and shriveled, resemble the hands of a small child. But don't let them fool you. There's a deadly power in those hands. He can pull in his long neck as a snake does with its feelers. as a snail does with its feelers. There are 3 heads on it. One is large and looks like the head of a crocodile. From its mouth he can spit icy fire, but where a crocodile has its eyes, it has 2 protuberances. These are extra heads. One resembles the head of an old man. With it he can see and hear. But he talks with the second head, which has the wrinkled face of an old woman. While listening to this description, Hero Hynreck went pale. "What was this monster's name?" he asked. "Smurg," Bastian repeated. "He has been wreaking his mischief for 1,000 years, because that's how old he is. It's always a beautiful maiden that he kidnaps, and she has to keep house for him until the end of her days. When she dies, he kidnaps another. Why haven't I heard of this dragon? Smurg flies incredibly far and fast. Up to now, he has always chosen other parts of Fantasia for his raids. Besides, they only happen once in every 50 years or so. Hasn't any of these maidens ever been rescued? No, that would take a very special sort of hero." These words brought the color back to Hero Hynreck's cheeks, and remembering what he had learned about dragons, he asked, "Has this Smurg a vulnerable spot?" "Oh," said Bastian, "I almost forgot. In the bottommost cellar of Rhaegar Castle, there's a lead axe. It's the only weapon Smurg can be killed with, so naturally he guards it well. You have to cut off the 2 smaller heads with it." "How do you know all this?" asked Hero Hynreck. Bastian didn't have to answer, for at that moment cries of terror were heard in the street. "A dragon! A monster! Up there in the sky! Horrible! He's coming this way! Run for your lives! No, he's already got somebody!" Hero Hynreck rushed out into the street, and all the others followed. Up in the sky, something that looked like a giant bat was flapping its enormous wings. For a moment, as it came closer, he looked exactly as Bastian had just made him up. And in his 2 shriveled but oh so dangerous little arms, he was clutching a young lady who was screaming and struggling with all her might. "Hynreck!" she screamed. "Hynreck! Hynreck, my hero! Help!" And then they were gone. Hynreck had already brought his black stallion from the stable and boarded one of the silver ferries that crossed to the mainland. "Faster, faster!" he could be heard shouting at the ferryman. "I'll give you anything, but hurry!" Bastian looked after him and muttered, "I only hope I haven't made it too hard for him." Atreyu cast a sidelong glance at Bastian, then he said softly, "Maybe we should get going too." "Going where?" "I brought you to Fantasia," said Atreyu. "I think I ought to help you find the way back to your own world." "You mean you go back sooner or later, don't you?" "Oh," said Bastian. "I hadn't thought about it. But you're right, Atreyu. Yes, of course you are." "You saved Fantasia," Atreyu went on, "and it seems to me you've received quite a lot in return. I have a hunch that you're aching to go home and make your own world well again. Or is there something that keeps you here?" Bastian, who had forgotten that he hadn't always been strong, handsome, and brave, replied, "No, I can't think of anything." Atreyu gave his friend a thoughtful look and said, "It may be a long, hard journey. Who knows?" "Yes," Bastian agreed. "Who knows? We can start right now if you like." Then the 3 knights had a short, friendly argument, because each claimed the privilege of giving Bastian his horse. Bastian soon settled the matter by asking them for Yika, their pack mule. Of course, they thought her unworthy of Bastian, but he insisted, and in the end, they gave in. While the knights were making ready for the journey, Bastian and Atreyu went to Quercabad's palace to thank the Silver Sage for his hospitality and bid him goodbye. Falkor, the luck dragon, who was waiting for Atreyu outside the palace, was delighted to hear they were leaving. Cities just didn't appeal to him, even if they were as beautiful as Amerganth. Silver Sage Quercabad was deep in a book he had borrowed from the Bastian Balthazar Buck's library. "I'm sorry you can't stay longer," he said rather absently. "It's not every day that a great author like you comes to see us. But at least we have your works to console us." Whereupon they took their leave. After seating himself on Falkor's back, Atreyu asked Bastian, "Didn't you want to ride Falkor?" "Later," said Bastian. "Now Yika is waiting for me, and I've given her my promise." "Then we'll wait for you on the mainland," cried Atreyu. The luck dragon rose into the air and was soon out of sight. When Bastian returned to the inn, the 3 knights were ready. They had taken the pack saddle off Yika and replaced it with a richly ornamented riding saddle. Yika didn't learn why until Bastian came over and whispered in her ear, You belong to me now, Yika. As the ferry carried them away from the Silver City, the old pack mule's cries of joy resounded over the bitter waters of Moru, the Lake of Tears. As for Hero Heinrich, he actually succeeded in reaching Morgul, the land of the cold fire. He ventured into the petrified forest of Wadgabe, crossed the 3 moats of Rhaegar Castle, found the lead axe, and slew the dragon Smurg. Then he brought Oglamar back to her father. At that point, she would gladly have married him, but by then, he didn't want to anymore. That, however, is another story and shall be told another time. See? Didn't end so bad for poor old Heinrich. He just has a really, really hard quest ahead of him. Anyway, that's it for Chapter 17. Tune in next time for Chapter 18. Thanks. Bye.